power on.
Hey, if you have a project that needs reliable cryptocurrency data, check out blocktap.io. Blocktap.io is a universal cryptocurrency API. You can get historical prices for Bitcoin and other digital assets that you can use to build charts and do market analysis. Blockchain data is also indexed, so you can get transaction statistics, address balances, and more for Bitcoin and other networks. Blocktap.io is free for personal use, and you don't even need to create an account to access the API. To get started, try some of the example queries on the homepage at blocktap.io. Again, that's blocktap.io, blocktap.io, and we thank them for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. Woo, let's get back to the show.
Accessing historical database. Year 2020. The tech giants become aware of the greatest threat to their corporatist domination. An obscure science and tech podcast becomes a major factor in a peaceful open source revolt against the military Silicon Valley industrial complex. The podcast, Sovryn Tech. Its host, Dr. Brian Sovryn. The tech giants tried to stop Sovryn Tech. They can't.
Woo, let us do this dance. It is time for your Sovryn Tech, and if you're wondering, where has this episode been? Well, I have had quite a bit of travel, as has been wont over the past year or so, which sometimes makes for a little inconsistency in release of episodes, but you always get the same number of episodes. It's never a problem. And frankly, if I didn't mention it, most people would never even know. But regardless, the thousands of you, some of you know, some of you are in the Telegram group or elsewhere on Twitter saying, whoo, where is that Sovryn Tech? Well, it's here for you, baby. The Golden Stallion, the Man of Tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R radio star, ready to get into it this week. And we have some evergreen subjects to get into, but then also really some, well, you know, there's years where I feel like, boy, we were just hitting Google really hard for a while. Then we were hitting Facebook really hard for a while. And while the Amazon World Domination Tour is not anything new for Sovryn Tech, in fact, that's a term we coined here, parts of Amazon, particularly Ring, has had really a banner 2019 and going into 2020. And we have covered increasingly creepier and creepier instances, subjects, events that have come up, data leaks and otherwise, various malicious acts being done using the Ring infrastructure and platform. We've been covering a lot of those. And, well, we're going to cover it one more time. At least, I'm sure it's going to come up again. But just to drive the point home, in case you still need a little more convincing that using Ring devices is a bad idea, well, we've got a hell of a story for you. But regardless, I want to open this baby up. I don't have a whole lot to get into. I mean, I guess we could talk about CES, but CES used to stand for Consumer Electronics Show. It might as well be like Consumer Excrement Show now, because that's all I saw around there. And I've actually, in the past, I've had Sovryn Tech listeners who've very much been boots on the ground at CES, and they just verify what I've been saying for years about that show. I mean, the stuff that gets put out there, they're not doing anything innovative. They're just trying to create new market categories, and they have to basically convince you. It's like President Bush trying to convince you to go to war with Iraq, right? You know he's lying, you know he's full of shit, and he's even cracking a joke when you're not there about, oh, gee, where are those WMDs? And it's like that, right? I mean, it's not, nobody's dying, or at least I hope nobody's dying over these electronics, but you get my point, where they're just straight up lying to you, trying to convince you that, oh yeah, you've got to get a curved television this year. Oh yeah, you've got to get this. You've got to get 3D. You've got to get, when all of these things have completely fallen away. And don't even try to sell me on 4K or 8K or anything else. Pure horseshit. I mean, hey, I'm all about 1080p. I get it. I see the difference. I understand. But I think we hit a limit there. Okay, as far as you go beyond that, and you're basically just tricking and lying to the consumer. So there's not a whole lot to say about CES 2020. People went there, they got sick. There was some interesting computers, perhaps of some kind. Maybe AMD had some nice Ryzen releases and so on. But there's nothing really out there that came out where you should be salivating just waiting for it to be able to get into your hands. I didn't hear about a single device along those lines. And we've covered CES, in the past on Sovryn Tech. But again, we're to the point that these varying electronics, I mean, TVs, smartphones, computers, go down the list. The only thing we should really be talking about with any of this stuff, because also all of it is quote unquote smart. And as we say on this show now, I mean, really, if something has smart in front of it, it's meant for dumb people. I know that seems paradoxical, but it's true. There are some paradoxes in life that are absolutely true. That's why we have a word for it, as in paradox. But all these things are connected to the big bad internet, as we say, and the conversation at CES, if you want me to buy a new television, or if you want me to buy, a new smartphone or something like this, like the conversation, or a laptop, the conversation should be around security. Everything's fast enough. Everything's advanced enough. The resolution, man, high def, like what's Swordfish, right? The movie Swordfish. You want to quote John Travolta, right? Where everything's high def, you can practically taste the brain matter, right? I mean, we're there. There's nowhere further to go. We should just be constantly talking about security. But of course, why isn't that happening? Because the way that they get a lot of these consumer devices down to, a cost that could get your average Joe somehow excited about it is because these devices are basically spyware. They're spy devices. And not necessarily that they're selling the information collected on them to the government, okay, or to some alphabet soup organization, but I'm sure they do, but because they're selling it off to advertisers, varying third parties and everything, and you have no idea where the hell your data is going and what they're doing and, what kind of pervy shit's going on, Ring. But like I said, we'll talk about that later. But the conversation should really be around that at CES, and it's not. And also, sadly, I don't hear a lot of people demanding that even, which is incredibly unfortunate. There are some companies out there that seem to give a shit, that seem to be consumer facing again. Again, I mean, there was a time where, CES used to be an exciting thing. A lot of this stuff, a lot of the developments, a lot of the technologies that would come out, devices that would come out, software that would come out would be very exciting because a lot of it was consumer facing. You think in the late 80s, late 90s, there and even maybe even the late aughts. And this did not happen in the late, if you want to say, well, it just takes the latter part of a decade for this stuff to turn consumer facing. Well, that didn't happen in the teens, right? In the 2010s, that did not occur. In fact, quite the opposite. Bottom line is that, stuff isn't developed consumer facing anymore. Now it's basically, how do we trick the consumer to thinking that they need what we are selling? And you could say it's been going on for a while, and to some degree that's true. But there really was a time, especially with software, back when we called it software and not apps, where software and devices were really, people had to deliver the goods. Apple had to create the fucking iMac that made some goddamn sense to get people to buy Apple computers again. Boy, imagine those days. where Apple was making pro-consumer devices. Holy shit. Boy, that's been a long time. Go down the list of it. So anyway, CES 2020, bottom line, pointless. If you wanted me to talk about it, there. I talked about it, and I mean, there's just nothing exciting that came out of there. Again, you know, the mantra that we should be having is security is sexy. Remember, you can't have security without privacy. Not really. You also can't have freedom without privacy, but I digress. I got to give credit, we got to give credit where it's due. And a company that at least tries, at least, puts in the yeoman's effort, as it were, is Mozilla. And of course, I am a major proponent of people using Firefox on whatever platform you happen to be on. And I want to just go through quick. I put a link in the show notes for this. I thought this was pretty nice. They sent out an email maybe once a week or so. It's not too annoying, actually, because there are companies that make their emails annoying as fuck. Mozilla does not really happen to be one of those. I will... Some things that, and the thing is, you can follow fairly well what Mozilla is planning on and what they're tracking and everything. Something that I feel like Mozilla has really, and I don't mind because I've fallen off this wagon as well. While Mozilla did come out finally with their VR browser for the Oculus platform, Mozilla had their own plans for what the virtual reality web is going to look like. I feel like they've just completely fallen off that wagon. There's a conversation to have around, the viability of VR this time around. I still think it's going, the train might be going a little slower up the hill right now, but I still think it's making forward progress. Again, I am not on the VR bandwagon anymore. I mean, that is one of the technologies that I was really supportive of for much of the history of Sovryn Tech. But really, ever since ever since John Carmack left Oculus, now, and I always said that was my stipulation. Well, it happened. We talked about that a few months back, and that's it for me. I'm just not going. I'm not going there anymore. But it is interesting sadly, that Mozilla has kind of fallen away on that. And it's unfortunate because, again, they're a company that really, I feel like, tries to do the right thing. If anything, they at least say the right things, even if in the background you might want to wonder. But I don't mind Mozilla. I love the work that they do. I'm glad Firefox exists. It is one of the bulwarks keeping the open web alive, and that is an incredibly important thing right now. But anyway, they send out an email every once in a while. Sometimes it's stuff for developers. Other times it's stuff for the everyday, person to perhaps give a shot. And they actually put out something. This is from January 23rd, 2020. And I thought it was pretty interesting. Here's the headline. And this is from their blog. Data Detox, 5 ways to reset your relationship with your phone. I love that headline alone because I don't think most of us, we've got a great opening story to get into, which also has to do with, relationships with devices, perhaps, or lack thereof. But I want to talk about this for a minute. This stuff, what we're going to cover here is kind of basic, I feel like, for Sovryn Tech listeners. But maybe you want to take this link and share it with, people that aren't Sovryn Tech listeners. But we all have smartphones. And so this is something viable, really, for everybody. So if you want to do a little, I hate to use this word, but if you want to do a little evangelical work, here you go. Anyway, it's Data Detox, 5 ways to reset your relationship with your phone. And that's really a great way to think about it, right? We do have a very, these black slabs, these fondle slabs are with us all the time. That's really a relationship. So anyway, let's get to it here. Of course, they bring up statistics that the average person spends about 4 hours a day on their phones. That's probably being generous. In fact, there's an app, at least for Android, there's an app listed, and I know there's something similar for iPhone, but there's an app listed in this story, which is the Digital Wellbeing app. Of course, you have to have a later version of Android to access that, but it actually tells you like everything you do with your phone. Of course, initially, that should creep you the fuck out that Google has that data, right? Because they're not anonymizing it. They're just not. In fact, the first point on this one is one that I don't think a lot of people think about and goes to show that it's not being anonymized. But where you can see all of the stats of how you use your phone, how long is the screen on, etc. Okay. I don't know if, we got to be careful when we say what's the average time that people spend on their phones. I mean, if you use your phone as your music player, basically as your, glorified Walkman, or as your, how you play audiobooks and things like this. I would, if you count that, again, that's not screen on time, right? Because that's just stuff playing. I'm on my phone way more than 4 hours a day. But again, that's because I'm using it for all of my audio. So I don't know if that counts as that, and I'm sure you might feel the same. I'm not sure exactly the study how they quantified what 4 hours a day looks like, but that's something to consider. And because you're using it that much, that's plenty of time for, you to get mapped and what you do every day to get mapped. And let's get to the first one, actually. It's the second one that I was referencing earlier, but let's get to the first thing that they recommend here. And it's number 1, which is adjust phone permissions. So this is smartphone hygiene. And no, I don't mean taking an alcohol wipe to your screen, even though you're just using it while you're sitting on the toilet. Weren't you? You know you were. But adjust phone permissions. Very basic thing. Again, there's instructions in the link in the show notes how to do all of this. But they're recommending, and I think it's a fine thing. In fact, here, I'll read this quick paragraph. Start your detox by adjusting your app permissions. Does that game you downloaded need access to your location, photos, or contacts? While you're there, you can stop push notifications altogether from apps you don't want to hear from. And then they tell you exactly how to do it. That's a great point, and one that, to this day, even though every time you install an app, it'll come up with asking you, okay, do you want to give it permission to access your photos or access this? Most people don't even read that, and they just hit allow. And again, this is something where it can, at the very least, make people aware that this is possible and that this is a thing. And, actually, while I was recording, you might not even notice this. There's a point already in the few minutes that I've been recording this where my desktop OS gave me a notification and it just threw me off while I'm recording. Annoying as fuck. Of course, I turned off notifications now. But imagine when you get notifications from apps you frankly don't give a shit about, but it comes up, and if you have your notification sounds on or the vibration on or something like that, or even if you just like to regularly look at your screen, or if it's getting fed to your Fitbit on your wrist or whatever, imagine how much each of these, or how many pointless notifications. Sure, I get it. If you're getting a Telegram message or a Signal message, you want to know, and you want to know right when it happens. Perhaps it's important. But for so many, meaningless ones, you're just getting thrown off of your game all day long, nonstop. And most people don't think about this sort of thing. Again, I know this is kind of basic for longtime Sovryn Tech listeners, but I want to cover this. And again, I want you to be able to take it to other people. And maybe we could have some, again, we can not just like what it said at the top, where to reset your relationship. But yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Reset your relationship, reconsider your relationship, with your smartphone. So let's go to number 2 here, which is one that I think even seasoned security experts and people who really care about their privacy don't think about. This one's very, very simple, but it's kind of insidious. Here's number 2. Change your phone's name. I'm going to read the paragraph quick. We don't really think about our phone's name, but if you look now, chances are it's your name. It might not seem like a big deal, but every time you connect to Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, everyone around you can see your name. Why not change it to your favorite fictional character's name or make up something funny? And they give you instructions on how to do it. This is such an easy thing to do because, again, it probably is your name. You logged in with your Google account or your Apple account or whatever, and bammo, there was your name in full glory. And that's exactly what's happening. Unless you're using like Google Fi or, you have a VPN on your device at all times. And even then, actually, I think the name getting transmitted when it connects, that might still be open from VPN. I'd have to look at how that traffic's being routed. But regardless, it's a good idea to change this up. In fact, I love it because I've told people 6 ways to Sunday. I've said, and just over and over again, I've told people, when you get, like when I used to, the Dark Android project, right? When you create a device that is meant to have, security and privacy are first and foremost in its use. I've said, okay, when you use this device is for anonymity. You are not going to be whatever your name is. Even when you're using it, you're going to change your internal dialogue to where you are using basically a different name, perhaps a fictional character's name. In fact, the example I always give, it's like when you go on tour, you're not, to use an example for me, you're not Brian Sovryn anymore. You're the Green Ranger or whatever. Use your favorite fictional character. I love that. I think that's a great way, to consider. Really, that's a great tip to go with when you're going online, is be somebody else, right? Get it, and that creates a mindset that is really your first barrier, your first protective barrier of your privacy and of your information, is that you stop thinking about putting in your information and you think of yourself basically as, a pseudonymous character of some kind. And that's such a simple trick to do. I love the fact that Firefox recommended this. I wish they would have gone further. Or should I say Mozilla recommended this? I wish they would have gone further with it and said, you should really take this as far as you can go. Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. I think that's wonderful. But anyway, that's change your phone name. Step one. I mean, really. Number 3, this is something we talk about on Sovryn Tech all the time too, which I was glad that they brought up, which is basically, and they call it an app cleanse. That's really just engaging in app minimalism or software minimalism that we talk about on Sovryn Tech, which means only have the apps that you need, get rid of all the other horseshit. It's a great tip. We can move on from that one. Let's go to number 4. Don't worry, there aren't many. There's just 2 more here. Number 4, this is another one that we did a full story of the week on Sovryn Tech years ago, okay? Because this just became something that you could do more readily and easier. It was always fairly easy on iPhone, and it just recently became simpler to do on Android. And that is set your phone to gray. Okay, now I'm going to read their small paragraph quick, just to explain it very succinctly. Okay, why you want to do this. And when we say set your phone to gray, literally that's saying set it to where the screen displays no color. You're going back to, it's, the 1950s again, and television is black and white, or in this case, your smartphone is black and white. Why do that? Let me read it here quick. Ever wonder why it feels like you need to check your phone all the time? Color plays a huge role in that. The bright red push notifications and text alerts that come through make it seem as if your friend's party invite this Saturday is the most important thing to read right this second, when it's not. I would dare say, don't bother with fucking parties, but whatever. Anyway, but it's a clever way to get you, that's me talking, not Mozilla, but it's a clever way to get you back onto the app. Avoid falling into any rabbit holes by using your phone's grayscale feature. It might seem like a simple trick, but it really works. Basically, you're removing the stimulating colors from your phone, which means you'll be less motivated to check your phone every few minutes. This is a great thing to do. And in fact, I have it set up so that on the quick drawer on Android at the top, I put the grayscale button, and this is only possible in later versions of Android when you have the digital well-being app, because with that you can turn on the grayscale feature, but I have it right in my quick drawer. So that way I can quickly turn color on or color off. I mean, I get it. Sometimes you're going to share a picture, right? Or I don't know, maybe you're looking at, I wish you weren't, but maybe you're looking at Instagram and you want to see whatever's happening in full color. Okay, sure. So this way, when it's in the quick drawer, you can turn it on for the few seconds that you need it and then turn the color right back off. Believe me, I know this sounds simple, just like Mozilla was saying, but it really works. It keeps you from looking at the goddamn thing. It keeps the thing from being so exciting and nay, hypnotic. They know, I mean, Silicon Valley companies, and especially social media companies, I mean, they hire behavioral psychologists, behavioral specialists, marketers, all kinds of people they hire the same people, and I know the video game industry does this too. They hire, people that have been making Las Vegas slot machines the hottest thing going that you can't avoid for decades. They hired those same people to somehow make their apps addictive. This is one way of fighting that. So great recommendation from Mozilla here. Number 5, this is the one that I think is kind of impractical and difficult, and it's set usage goals. So because if you have the digital well-being app on your phone, or for iPhone, if you have downtime and app limits, there are ways that you can set in, kind of force certain limits on your phone usage. Folks, I get it, but if you need to do that, you've got a lot of other problems going on. And let me assure you, the way to actually set usage goals with your phone is not to go into an app and turn off the internet from the hours of whatever, or turn off notifications from the, between the hours of 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. or something like that. I know this is going to sound kind of harsh, but I think it needs to be said very harshly. And I'm going to quote William Shatner, who I remember when he said this when I was a kid, and I remember hurting my feelings. That's why I say, I know this sounds harsh. I remember it, kind of hurting my feelings, and he was talking to Star Trek fans. And you know what he said? You know what William Shatner said? It was on Saturday Night Live. It was meant to kind of be a joke, but then at the same time, actually today, I think he's dead right, especially when you consider Raylos, but we're not going down that road. He said, get a life. You know what? If you have to, if you are so out of fucking control that you have to set limits on internet usage, like you have to set forceful limits, you have to turn on an app to set forceful limits on how you use your devices. Get a life. Go outside, meet real people, be present with those people, talk to those people. Do not watch YouTube videos with those people, because then you're just falling into the trap, and now you're both stuck into the world that isn't right in front of you. Pay attention to each other, actively listen to each other, get a group of people together. Go out for dinner. Toss all of the smartphones into a bin at the end of the table and point and laugh at the person if you must, if they try to reach for it. No, I don't want you to be shaming people, but you get my point. Get a life. If number 5 on this list is a problem, you should be able to have some, there's a trick. There's a mental trick called 5 minutes more. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. Okay, I'll explain it to you. 5 minutes more is that when you feel the urge to do something that you know may not be healthy or a good idea or rude or whatever. Okay, 5 minutes more it's the mental trick of telling yourself, no, 5 minutes more. And then that's 5 minutes more where you're not doing the thing. And this works for all kinds of things. This works, frankly, in the gym. No, 5 minutes more. This works to not look at your phone. No, 5 minutes more. This works for, whatever. I mean, if you're writing, no, 5 minutes more. And what you do is you keep telling yourself 5 minutes more. And it's amazing how with these short-term goals, how it works. Like your mind is okay with that. Okay. And ironically, it's the same process. It's flipping the table on what the smartphone and like these notifications are doing to you, where the notifications are constantly tricking your brain into 5 minutes more. But if you take control of the narrative yourself mentally, and you keep saying to yourself, no, 5 minutes more. Again, not 5 minutes more on Instagram, 5 minutes more off of Instagram, motherfucker. Or 5 minutes more off of YouTube. How about that? Flip the table on them. It works. They know it works. That's why they do it to you. Well, do it to them. Again, I know that sounded kind of harsh, but folks, I actually really like the way that they put it in, that Mozilla put this in the headline for this little blog post. Reset your relationship with your phone. Rethink that device. The best thing you can do to think of that device as a goddamn disease. It is a virus laden, like a leper handed it to you or something, okay? And and just point at it, I mean, I'm reminded in Ben-Hur, like when they see lepers, and when you see a smartphone, it's lepers. I mean, think of it that way. Yes, I know. Believe me, I know. In my business, in my line of work, at this present time, I have to have one, right? I've got to be on. And if I want to have freedom to get everything I want to into a daily schedule, I need to be able to be active and on and responsive in a mobile way that only a smartphone really can provide. I understand that, okay? But also, just because you need it does not mean you need it to take over your life entirely. Does that make sense? We've talked about this. We talked about it throughout 2019. Something you can do is that, because part of the problem with the smartphone. Okay, and look, there's a lot of new listeners on Sovryn Tech. Some of you maybe have never heard this before, so I'm happy to redress it. And it's actually going to play nicely into our next subject, which has to do with my, I guess I'd say maybe my second favorite thing in the world. And that's books. I know what you're asking. Okay, no, wait, what's actually your first and third? Well, my first is sex. My third is actually writing books. But anyway, what's number 4? Yeah, probably recording podcasts. But regardless, with smartphones, part of the problem here is that they do everything. Right? Just like we were talking about. They're your audiobooks. They're your, how you listen to music. And I do it too. They are how you read eBooks, which we're going to talk about in a second. You do everything with them. Well, you can get a separate device that isn't persistently connected, right? That, like an old smartphone that you can turn into a glorified MP3 player, and that can run the Audible app and can do all kinds of shit. It's great. Try it. I have. It's wonderful to have that. Oh, you could probably connect it to Wi-Fi if you really need to, but when you're out and about, well, shit, it doesn't connect to Spotify. Well, is the problem the glorified MP3 player, or is the problem, that doesn't have persistent connectivity, or is the problem Spotify? I don't know about you, but I'd argue that the problem is actually Spotify. Even though I know Spotify can do offline playback, right? Anyway, regardless. Yep, you're going to have to throw a 128 gig SD card in it or something, or micro SD card, but so what? There are options to really go about even physically resetting your relationship with your phone. I thought it was just a very simple little blog post that I think is worthwhile to consider. A couple points in it some people maybe never even considered. Again, even seasoned listeners or seasoned security experts and privacy advocates have never thought about. So it's a brilliant thing, and it's a great thing to get out there and share. I know a lot of you don't want to share Sovryn Tech, to all your friends, because then they're going to find out, holy shit, Bill's a freak. I get it. I understand. I know why the show doesn't get shared on social media. It's fine. Share this then, okay? And at the very least, make people aware. Get the conversation started. Hell, people might start thinking it's cool to have a black and white screen on their phone. That'd be wonderful. In fact, really, there's been a couple times where this has been put on display at CES, but it's yet to catch on. Having a black and white, e-ink display, even if it's color e-ink, even though that's been in development for a very long time and still hasn't gotten exactly practical yet. But having a phone with an e-ink display, I would love that. Fuck, that'd be great, because then you don't feel bad about staring at that screen even. Well, maybe that would make things worse. Regardless, I wouldn't mind it. So, speaking of e-ink, that's a perfect segue into what we're going to talk about next. And this is our main story of the week. And it's from a site that actually concentrates very much on e-readers, which often use e-ink. I personally, the man of tomorrow, am a big fan of e-ink readers. I have had varying generations of Kindle e-readers. I even originally I had a Nook, because I used to be so crazy about, Barnes & Noble is just my favorite place on the planet. Bookstores have almost always been my favorite places on the planet, and you can always feel kind of comfortable when you go into one, no matter where you are in the world. They're wonderful. They make for a wonderful refuge for, shall we say, the more intelligent among us. But, you know, at the same time, when you're traveling the world, an e-reader is a great thing to have because you can carry effectively the Library of Alexandria with you if you had all of it, or if you had access to even some of it. You know, maybe some works of Berosus, that'd be nice. But if we had any of that left and the Christians didn't burn it, God damn it, sorry, didn't mean to go there, you could have it on your e-reader, all of it. It'd be great. In fact, you probably could put everything that was, you know, if you had scans of everything that was in the Library of Alexandria onto your e-reader. What a beautiful thing and what an amazing read, and how that would change probably our very understanding of humanity and history and, well, maybe our present. But again, I digress. We're not going there. Let's keep going. It's a wonderful thing to have so many books available with you. In fact, having some of the higher end models of Kindle e-readers is great because you can get your Audible content, you know, your whatever audiobooks or whatever you get off of Audible. You can get that installed on there, and if you have Bluetooth headphones, well, away you go, and you have your audiobooks as well as whatever ebooks that you want. Anyway, bottom line, I am a huge fan of e-readers. I mean, just a huge, especially the e-ink displays. In fact, you know, talking about, and we talk about this a lot in the show, but really, I am personally, okay, not just so you don't think I walk around thinking I'm some kind of superior being among you. Well, maybe I think, no, I'm not saying I think that. But I am terrified at the amount of time I spend staring at screens. It's worse when I think about how much of that time is not doing anything fun, for that matter. But regardless, I'm terrified at how much time I spend staring at screens for varying reasons. In fact, it was the other day where I wanted to finally, I had like maybe an hour or two to spare, and I wanted to relax. Okay. And I think I had already got my fuck on earlier in the day, you know, so I wasn't exactly going to do that at that instance. So what was I going to do? And I knew, I almost had a headache. I did not want to stare at a screen anymore. And I looked around and I realized, God damn it, everything I have has a screen or requires a screen to interact with it, you know, and what am I supposed to do? Well, I've always felt that e-readers, e-ink e-readers, were, you know, kind of it doesn't feel like you're looking at a screen when you look at those. And it doesn't. And I think that's why they're still popular, right? In fact, we're going to talk about their popularity here in this story. So that's always kind of my bastion. That's where I go to when I don't want to look at a screen. I have some physical books, but anyway, it always feels, the feeling I get when staring at a screen is not the same that I get when I'm looking at e-ink. When I look at e-ink, it really does, especially at the DPI they have them now, it's so high, it really does look like you're more or less looking at paper. So I give them a pass, and I think it's a beautiful and wonderful technology that I've been supportive, well, as long as it's been around. But anyway, this story is from February 8th, 2020, and it's not a long one, so I'm going to read the entire piece by Marcus Riley. And it's titled, What Happened to the eBook Revolution? Now, when I saw the story come up, I was like, well, wait, what do you mean? I'm still living it, you know? In fact, I pay sometimes ridiculous sums over the years for books that I know will never get put into e-ink, or made into an EPUB or Mobi or AZW3 or whatever, you know, the Amazon's formats or on Kobo, you know, whatever. That I know it'll never happen, and I get them turned into PDFs so that they can get preserved and easily shared. That's one of the major advantages of ebooks, I would say, is that, there's no printing cost, right? So you don't have to worry about that. Well, is this book good enough to put back into print? No, nothing needs to go out of print in the ebook revolution, as it were. Which is a great thing. Also, it's very easy to share books, or at least it should be. But of course, companies inject a shit ton of DRM into them, and, well, that doesn't always work out, or, you know, we're in a consistent arms race of stripping DRM. I mean, I buy books on Amazon all the time, you know, ebooks, in fact. But I'll tell you, the instant I get them, I strip the DRM out of them, like, right away. And it's not like I upload them anywhere and share it with people necessarily, even though I have no qualms about doing such a thing. I do that because I want to make sure that I always have access to this ebook, right? Because we have been there. In fact, we talked about this years ago on Sovryn Tech, where, in fact, it was ironic. I think it was 1984 in Animal Farm that Amazon basically lost rights to. And so they forcefully pulled it from anybody that had it downloaded onto their Kindle, regardless of whatever Kindle it was. Now, if you had your own copy of it that you transferred to your Kindle, you were fine. It wasn't getting deleted. But if you got it through Amazon, they just pulled it. And that's a reality that can happen with so many of these interconnected devices. In fact, there's a story about Tesla and the autopilot getting yanked off of it, along with ludicrous mode or whatever. We're not going to get into that this week, at least. But this is how you need to think about these things. So stripping DRM from books that you purchase, that you buy, that you put the money down on. This is not piracy, even though I have no problem with piracy. Dare I say it's an ethical imperative to engage in. Especially stripping DRM for starters. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with me just making sure that when I put my money down, my money is spent on something that I will have continued access to in perpetuity. That's what it's about. But it's nice to be able to share it with people quickly too. I mean, that's great. And that's one of the beauties of the ebook revolution. Again, the digital world, as it were. Okay, and when we think about it, things that we've translated from analog into digital, books, music, into MP3s, movie files, go down the list of it. These things have dramatically changed, really, the economic models that we've known throughout human history. And we haven't known that many, but the ones that we have known, go down the list, have dramatically changed because of, digital, these analog items getting turned into digital items that can be copied without any theft involved, right? Nobody's actually losing anything, so it's not really theft. This changes everything, and nobody wants to think about it. And this story's kind of going to touch on it on that point, because it's going to get into, well, wait, what do we price these things at? Like the price discovery of a book comes down to printing cost, paying the author, etc., all kinds of things that have to do with the analog space. In the digital space, why should a book cost anywhere near as much? Why should an ebook cost anywhere near as much as a physical book? The production cost is nowhere near the same. It doesn't make any sense, but you run into problems here. But it points out, I think as we go through this, and there's other things to talk about in this article, that's why I wanted to share it with you. It points out the inherent hypocrisy that digital items really point out, about our economy that we live within, the economic models that we live under, or that we engage in. But regardless, that is a bigger conversation for another time. If you really want me to talk about it, feel free to ask me about it. In fact, if you ask me about it, maybe we'll get into it on a weekly Q&A on the Zomia One Underground, which you can join by going to zomia1.com. And on the right-hand side, you'll see where you can join for, I think the lowest number might be $2, but you get access to all the content. You just go there and you get thousands of hours, access to thousands of hours of content, as well as new content that comes out every single week. It's a great time, and I dare say a great value. Zomia1.com for that. Anyway, let's read this story. What happened to the ebook revolution? It's been 12 years since the Kindle first appeared on the scene. Again, this story is from February of 2020, very fresh. And within a couple of years, it became clear that e-readers were no passing fad. In fact, the experts of the day confidently told us that in the dim and distant future of 2020, in fact, that's exactly where they predicted by 2020, Print books would be largely relegated to the role of decorative shelf fillers, and we would all have a personal pocket electronic library. That's not quite the way it turned out. In fact, ebooks constitute around 20% of book sales, with the rest being traditional print volumes. A decade ago, we'd have expected those numbers to be the other way around by now. So what happened? It all comes down to two factors: consumer habits and money. Here's the subheader: Gen Z loves reading books. Generation Z represents the 20-somethings who have never known a world without the internet and social media. You'd expect them to be the ones to lap up ebooks, but that's simply not proved to be the case. Here's the thing: the average Gen Zer spends hours of every day in front of a screen, stealing, breaking in, just like I was talking about, and I'm not even a Gen Zer. I'm a millennial, but anyway, and not just for Snapchat and Facebook they go on. Even when it comes to, for example, playing card games, usually seen as a traditional way to pass the time with physical cards at hand, or even watching TV, the smartphone screen is becoming the platform of choice. Yet when younger readers want to read a book, they prefer to put the tech aside and do so the old-fashioned way. Stallion breaking in, I read this and it warms my heart. My heart and my cockles. Maybe even the subcockles. Thank you. I am so glad to hear that this is the reality, even though, again, I love ebooks. I'm a huge fan. Okay, it's how I have 99.9999% of my collection of books is ebooks. But I love that this is the reality, because this, hopefully, books will be the gateway drug to getting back to doing things in the physical realm and in a more analog way. But let's keep reading here. Incredibly, the main users of e-readers are their parents and even grandparents. Baby boomers in particular fell hard for e-readers. They negate the need to go out to a bookstore, and the whole question of print size becomes an irrelevance, as they can zoom the page as much as they wish. Now, they're going to get into another subheader here, but I want to talk about this for a second. Yeah, I can see a million reasons why baby boomers would love this. I mean, we're talking about people that, in fact, what was I watching? Inside Bill Gates' Brain. It was a little Netflix documentary series. It's really, I was going to review it when it initially came out. I think it came out last summer in 2019. This is not worth reviewing. It's not worthwhile. It's not interesting. It's crap. And in fact, really, I think it's this documentary series was really just an advertisement for Diet Coke, because strangely, Bill Gates just keeps drinking a Diet Coke throughout it, and it's really apparent that it's Diet Coke. Obviously, I know that it's marketing, and they probably got funded by Coke, or Bill Gates has a large stock in Coke, and they're at the Bilderberg meeting. Whoa, sorry, never mind that. And also, it kept showing, there's multiple points, and everybody knows Bill Gates loves books, and what he's reading. Certainly people are interested to know what he's reading. I am as well, admittedly. I mean, you got to be curious about it, or you don't have to be, but I understand where people would be curious about it, even if it's morbid, or a morbid curiosity. But somehow they just kept showing off. Was it Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker? This book keeps reappearing over and over again throughout this little 3-episode documentary series. And it's fucking annoying, and because I think Steven Pinker is dead wrong in his conclusions about modern civilization. I mean, he's so far off base. And I know I've done Q&As about this in the past, in the Zomi One Underground. So, if you want to hear about that, or you can ask me about it. If you really want me to talk about it in Sovereign Tech, I can. But I mean, Steven Pinker is so off base, so completely wrong in his conclusions. And there aren't enough people out there to really say that and to make the case, and I wish more would. But regardless, that wasn't just marketing, right? Steven Pinker doesn't need you to market to buy his books. There was definitely a bit of programming, I feel like, that Bill Gates was engaging in and constantly fucking showing off that book, which that book is really just trying to tell you, actually, everything's great. Everything's wonderful right now. You don't stop getting mad about the state of things. Don't worry about your privacy. Don't worry about this. Everything is fine and dandy. And this is how we are going to get to a peaceful utopian future and blah, blah, blah. And I call horseshit on the whole goddamn thing. So there was a point to them showing that off. But I bring this up not to talk about Steven Pinker. even though I'm happy to trash him. I bring this up because you see Bill Gates constantly walking around with almost a duffel bag, a satchel of books at all times. And he's just walking around with 10, 12 books. In fact, they did one of the books he was reading. He had to do with blockchain, which I thought was interesting. But regardless, that shouldn't be a surprise for the CEO of Microsoft, considering, that they did, at least for a little while, implement Bitcoin and had some interest in Ethereum, even though, well, that's bullshit. But not Bitcoin, Ethereum. Bitcoin's the real deal. But regardless, this is what people did. People used to carry around, they'd have, when they'd travel on a plane or on a train or whatever, they would carry around a bag just full of books that they would want to read. And this is not uncommon for people of that generation. I think people look at Bill Gates and think it's weird that he's doing that. No, that's incredibly commonplace. For baby boomers and others, they do this kind of shit all the time. Or even if they do carry around a book, it's this hefty, probably fairly weighty hardcover edition of something. Maybe it's also, like they said, large print. So an ebook would be an e-reader would be very attractive because these things weigh practically nothing. And actually, a lot of them are waterproof and practically indestructible also, which is great when you're on a cruise or something like that. There's a lot of advantages here as far as that goes. So anyway, I can see how that's the thing, but I am so pleased that these Gen Zers are wanting physical books, and I talked about this before because whenever I can talk about books, I want to. But books, paper books, and I understand this, even as somebody who's a fan of an e-reader, paper books engage all of the senses, right? There's the smell of the pages, the feel of the pages, the sight of the pages. Every sense you've got, even, dare I say, taste. Because, smells you can taste too, right? Not just whiff them. Every sense you have gets activated by a paper book, and especially when it's an old book, oh, the preciousness. And I'm not kidding. There's no exaggeration there. It is a precious feeling. Even though there's books that I send off to get scanned, and they effectively go through a destructive process and get recycled after the fact, I do take a moment to enjoy, touching a 100-year-old book or something even older, or, something that maybe it's only 30 or 40 years old. But knowing that it's been around, there's so much to experience, with where that book has been and the days that it has seen. There's certainly a romanticism even in the book itself, not within its contents, but just the book, the object. So powerful thing, and I could totally understand how it stands in complete contrast. And really, a paper book must just feel so alien in our civilization today. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I could really see why people who have grown up, who don't know a world like I do, where I spent a chunk of my life, not half of it, but used to be half of it, where I had spent half of it without the internet or without smartphones and so on. And the book is that thing that's still there that, well, anyway, I could see where people would be attracted to it. Let's read the next part here. The Apple versus Amazon pricing war. Ooh, this is where things get interesting. However, reading on, there's more going on when it comes to the reading habits of Generation Z. This has been called the most financially savvy generation yet. Well, yeah, well, they have to be, because you fucking previous generations have screwed up the economy so much. And the people you've put into office, and I don't just mean President Trump. I mean Obama, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Reagan, go down the fucking list. Bunch of assholes. Anyway, let's keep going. And that's not even getting into senators or, Congress people. Let's keep reading. You can bet that if ebooks were the most cost-effective option, they would have embraced them with greater warmth. Back in 2010, when we were predicting the ebook revolution, it appeared that this was exactly what would happen. Bestsellers were typically selling at $9.99 when the equivalent hardcover was $25 or more. This made the early Kindle a viable investment, despite its $400 price tag. The lower cost, Stanley bringing in the lower cost of the books, justified paying more for the device, up front, right? You'd buy just a few books and you'd pay for the device, the e-reader itself, because of the money that you saved. Well, that didn't last long. Reading on. But as e-readers gained popularity, the major publishers became increasingly uncomfortable. They felt that this $9.99 price tag was devaluing books. Worse, many understood that Amazon was probably selling at a loss in order to corner the market. Stallion breaking in, that's exactly what was happening. As we have covered on this show, in real time, Amazon did not have a profitable quarter. They did not have a profitable quarter until just a couple of years ago. Like 3-4 years ago, they finally had a profitable quarter. And Amazon was undercutting prices, and Bezos was convincing investors. He was doing bond sales after bond sales. We covered them on the show over the years. We've been doing this for almost 10 years, folks. This is a lot of time. Okay? We covered all of this. And he was doing that, and he was convincing investors. He says, you don't understand. We get the prices low enough. We're going to hook the people in. We're going to make them Prime subscribers. We're going to get them into our ecosystem, and then they can't leave. And then we can start jacking up the prices, right? And that's what's going on. But regardless, so yes, he was undercutting. And, there was that big battle. Was it Harbinger? No, not HarperCollins. There was a big battle that they had with the same company that published particularly a lot of J.K. Rowling's work and, the Harry Potter books and all of this. But anyway, we'll go on from there. Let's keep reading. Would this mean, reading on, that a couple of years down the line, they would start putting the squeeze on their suppliers? This was when Apple joined the fray. A competitive market had to be a good thing, and Apple was determined that $14.99 should be the minimum cost. Where things got tricky was when they signed up the 6 major publishers to their price plan, essentially forcing Amazon to either play ball or have no ebooks to sell. This resulted in years of antitrust lawsuits and over $150 million in sanctions against the publishers. But the standard was set. Ebook prices are now dictated by quote-unquote industry convention, and Amazon is forced to adhere to them. The result? While the e-commerce giant can discount print books as much as it likes, it has no such flexibility over the ebooks. It's a situation that still seems imperfect and is certain to be revisited over the coming year or so. In the meantime, ebooks are not going to disappear, but it seems the age of print is far from over too. Now, I mentioned Bill Gates earlier. It's interesting to point out that even in the 90s, because Bill Gates has written a couple books himself, and there was his second book, I believe. In that, he specifically talks about how he doesn't think print books are ever going to go away. In fact, this gets into, there's been an argument lately with the show Star Trek Picard, where a lot of people have said, hey, wow, this guy's using or this gal is using what looks like, an e-cigarette or whatever. Don't you think that they would have come up with something more advanced in the future? Or they're doing this or that, and none of this looks futuristic in science fiction anymore. And Michael Chabon, who is kind of the show head, more or less, or at least for the first season of Picard, he came out, and I think he made a very salient point about this. Okay, and that is that, well, there's some things that, we're never that have just gotten to a point of efficiency. You're never going to change the design of them. And his best example was the book, and not only Michael Chabon has said this. In fact, I've brought this up before in the past as well. Steve Jobs, during the D4 conference, when he was on stage with Bill Gates, he specifically said, some people were saying, well, are we going to get rid of this? Are we going to get rid of the mouse? Are we going to get rid of the keyboard? And Steve Jobs came right out and brilliantly said, he's like, no, we still drive cars with the steering wheel. Of course, now people would point out, well, what about autonomous cars? Well, yeah, what about them? Where are they? I could point to episodes where we read stories and we covered the development of driverless cars. And at that time, and we could say that was 2015 on Sovryn Tech, they said in 5 years, these are things will be on the road and all over the goddamn place, and people would be using them on the regular. I guess that didn't happen. Regardless, you could say, well, it's coming, Brian, it's coming. Okay, maybe. But if you're not an autonomous car, how are you going to drive a car? Yes, you are still going to use a steering wheel. And car companies have tried to improve upon this model, and it's never seen as an improvement. Okay, there are some things that you develop that, yes, they have reached their point of perfection. And I would argue that the book has done that as well. And there's a lot of thought. Read about books themselves, how they are designed. There's a lot of thought put into just the shape of a book, the dimensions of a book. In fact, the dimensions of a book used to be taken very, very seriously. Maybe not so much now, but there was a time where, that was a really, really big deal. So, no, there are some things that we are going to continue to have with us. I think they're raising a great point here. And I think Bill Gates is right about the matter that, no, print books are never going to go away. Because there's just something really special about them. And they're particularly special when you live in a world where everything is battery powered, but somehow you can get so much entertainment out of a book if you have the attention span left to read it. You get so much out of a book, and you just open it up. You don't have to turn it on. The battery never dies, and it's always there ready to go, and away you go to parts unknown when you travel or when you traverse through those pages. It's a beautiful thing. But the most interesting thing here, okay, now, again, there's no need. They're talking about the pricing problem. There's just as much of a marketing trick where a company is trying to force you to buy into, kind of like we were talking about earlier with CES, where a company tries to get you into a certain market category, say ebooks, and they try to force you in that direction. And certainly I could see with ebooks, because ebooks, like we talked about how Amazon could just rip books off of your device if they lost the copyright to it or the rights to it in any way. There's a degree of control that comes with that. Now, you don't have to buy Kindles. You can buy Kobos. There's all kinds of e-readers out there now that you can purchase that, do a great job. You just have to load the books on there yourself, put them on a micro SD card or whatever. And all of that, I think, is fine. Get out of Amazon's ecosystem if you can. That's wonderful. Okay. But there are plenty of times where a company, Apple was clearly trying to do this as well, where they try to get you into their sales funnel, right? But that's marketing hullabaloo. There is no real reason why ebooks and print books can't coexist. There's no, in fact, actually, a company, a publisher that I really, really like, that I'm a huge fan of, that being No Starch Press. They put out a lot of science books, tech books, cryptographic papers, everything. They're just wonderful. Programming books, they're awesome. Okay. In fact, few of the physical books I have are, 3 of them, I'm looking at them right now. 3 of them are books from No Starch Press. There's the book of IRC, and then I have a couple editions of Proof of Concept or Get the Fuck Out, which are really enjoyable. And when you buy from No Starch Press, when you buy a physical book, they give you the ebook for free. And that's economic honesty. It doesn't cost anything more to make the ebook, right? In fact, the ebook is what they create in the first place to, feed into the computer that creates the printed page itself. There's no reason to charge more for an ebook. When you buy the print book, you really should get both at the same time, because again, there's no cost up front to sending you even if the book is a few meg, there's on the back end, there's barely any cost to doing that. And you're already paying some degree of overhead for the physical edition. And if you want to add in a few cents of what it costs to stream that little bit of, PDF or EPUB data, well, fine. Okay. I don't think anybody's going to complain about it if the book costs 10 cents more, to do that. That's being economically honest about how this should really work. So again, No Starch Press is proving the point that there's no reason that both markets can't coexist. This idea that you need to jump into ebooks and ebooks alone was, like I said, a bit of marketing hullabaloo. It's a lie that you can only have one or the other. And, for market analysts to talk about, these guys are just, they're idiots. They're just reading tea leaves. Dare I say almost every economist is doing that. Yeah, there's some patterns you can point at and blah, blah, blah. Okay, I get it. But by and large, you're real. And you want to study human action and all this crap. Okay, there's some validity to that. But most of these, especially guys that are on CNBC or CNN or wherever the fuck, they're reading tea leaves. They might as well roll the dice in the morning and then just call, whatever the hell the dice showed. That's how it is. So for these market analysts to come out and say, well, by 2020 everything's going to be an ebook, why? Like, why even bother saying that? Because there's no real, it's apples and oranges for one. They're two very different ways of experiencing something. That's like saying that, that's like saying that when VHS came out, actually, I bet there are people who predicted this too, and fuck them. That's like saying, movie theaters are going to go out of business soon because VHS is going to make it pointless. I'm sure somebody was saying that. In fact, I bet even the MPAA might have been saying that. But regardless, clearly that didn't happen. Stop making these dumb-ass predictions. When something, a theater experience is wholly different from, being at home and watching a Blu-ray, 4K, or DVD, or VHS, whatever you got. And I know some of you are still watching VHS, and hey, I could use a VCR if you got a spare one laying around. You email me, bbs@sovereigntech.com, but I'm not here to talk about that. So the ebook revolution was kind of bullshit in and of itself, because there was no need for books to completely 100% transition into ebooks. If ebooks work well for you, then use them. If print books work better for you and you want that full experience and you have the shelf space, use those. I dare say the moral of this whole story, or at least of what I am trying to put forward to you, is that, and this plays in well with how we started the show with CES, don't let these companies tell you how you need to consume your content. Do it your own way. If DVDs are good enough for you, they're good enough for you. If print books are the way you like to rock your shit with print books. You don't have to listen to anybody else about what is the ethical way or what is the right way or what is the cool way to consume your entertainment or your infotainment or your educational material of any kind. You don't even have to listen to me about how to do that. There are advantages all the way around. But you know what? The other part of this, the other moral to this, and I kind of hinted at this earlier talking about Generation Z, is the message of hope. That thanks Satan, we're not just handing everything over to these fucking tech giants, be it Apple, Amazon, or, Google. Actually, we didn't even get into this. This was going to be something in the Foreplay at one point. Google shut down their ebook store. Or no, they shut down the magazines. And actually, they might have shut down their ebook store too. No, I think it was the magazines part that they shut down out of their, we talked about in the Q&A, that they took out of their Google News e-reader. It wasn't viable for them. But magazines, while niche today, are still a booming business. I even get physical magazines. I'm a huge fan of magazines, and I've been a proponent of them for years on the show because they are, they're kind of the anti-internet. But not as in they don't present great information. They do, but they give it to you, in my opinion, a better way, where it's slower, it's more thought out, it's not by the minute. It gives you time to not react, but act upon the information that you're given. Okay, it creates action, not necessarily reaction, which everything online just feels like a fucking reaction. And this is what's beautiful, is that the book is still so important that even the youngest of people are still dying to hold the printed page in their hands. And that gives me, I hate the word hope, I really do, but it gives me so much hope that, again, we're not handing everything over to the tech giants, that not everything is on the stage of the internet. And it's so beautiful because a printed book, how much more private can you get? Right? I can imagine all these companies got to fucking hate the printed page. They have to hate printed books because, God damn it, we can't collect any data off of that thing. Oh, then hold on to them all the tighter. Don't give them the data. You could say I'm being a hypocrite because I love, my ebook reader or, my e-reader, and I'm using it all the time. Again, that is a matter, I dare say, of pragmatism. I don't like that word either, but it's what makes sense for me, for my way. And also understand that I part of the reason that I read is so that I can present this information to the broader world, so that I can entertain and inform you. Okay, so, there's things around that. I mean, I cannot imagine the house I would need to hold all of the books that I want. And much like the same reason why I can't rely upon Spotify or Apple Music or whatever music streaming service, there are things that, I'm a weird fellow, and there are things that I am so into that no service is ever going to be able to provide. No public library is ever going to have the book. And in fact, I'd be terrified to even donate the book to a public library because it's so easy for someone to just keep it for themselves. And I wouldn't blame them. And I'm not going to say that they engaged in theft or anything like that, but I wouldn't blame them for why they take it away. And so there is an advantage to doing things, in ebook fashion. But also there's ways to read ebooks that respect privacy, that aren't, that isn't collecting data and sending it off somewhere. Again, you don't have to buy Kindles. Okay. But I'm just so happy to find out that there are people that get it, and that there are still some things that we hold dear and that we take as precious, that are not transmitting data constantly to, name the company. So, I wanted to get into Ring. I think I'm going to save that for the next episode. And I think we're going to wrap this baby up here. Make sure, something else you can do. Actually, you want to know, let me end off with this. Okay. A Sovryn Tech sponsor, that we've got to get in. Another great way to not be tracked is maybe listen to the old-fashioned radio. And you know what you can listen to on that old-fashioned radio? You can listen to Free Talk Live. 3 hours a night, 7 nights a week. They're on so many networks, radio stations across the United States. It is the number 27 talk show in the United States. You can listen to it. You can call in to them. Also, if you do, you want to engage them online, they have it as a podcast. You go to freetalklive.com and you can download all of their episodes completely for free. And there are a lot of episodes if you want to go really far back. But it is a great time. And hell, call in and talk about this. Talk about the beauty of the book. Talk about, saying, hey, look, these fucking companies, they can't tell me. I will decide which direction the market is going to go, or I will decide how I want to engage the market. They're not going to force me. They're not going to ram shit down my throat anymore, which is a primary message that Sovryn Tech's been trying to put out there for a very long time. In fact, I think I actually was in the Sovryn Tech Telegram group, which, by the way, if you want to join that, the link is in the show notes. You just go to the bottom of the show notes. You're going to find my Twitter, you're going to find the website, and you're going to find the link for the Telegram group. I think I saw it in the Telegram group where somebody basically went into Best Buy and said, and looked, they stared the Best Buy worker right in the face and said, I want the dumbest goddamn TV you've got. And I don't think he said goddamn, but it would have been great if he did. But anyway, I want the dumbest TV you've got. And I think the person basically said, it's like that again, the Best Buy worker looked at him like he was an alien. Like, what? You don't want smart features? You don't want that? Let's be intentional. Let's buy shit, if it's paper books, if it's dumb televisions, whatever. Buy shit that reins in data collection, regains our privacy. In fact, quick, this also got shared in the Sovryn Tech Telegram group, and I thought this was brilliant. It looks like it's from a tweet. Let's see, here we go. And I don't know, there's some conversation at the bottom of it, but it says tech enthusiasts ever, and then has the, colon. Everything in my house is wired to the Internet of Things. I control it all from my smartphone. My smart house is Bluetooth enabled, and I can give it voice commands via Alexa. I love the future, and it's all exclamation points. And then under that, so that's the tech enthusiast talking. Then under that, it's programmers and engineers. The most recent piece of technology I own is a printer from 2004, and I keep a loaded gun ready to shoot it if it ever makes an unexpected noise. I'm not one for guns, but that might be a worthwhile. But then above it, so that kind of a framework or framing of a conversation or exchange was put at the bottom. But then above that, here's where kind of this tweet comes in. And it says, I work in IT, which is the reason our house has, and it goes down the list. Let's go down it. Mechanical locks, mechanical windows, routers using OpenWRT, no smart home crap, no Alexa or Google Assistant, ... no internet connected thermostats. And bingo. Now, granted, mechanical locks, I mean, look, folks, there's not much that a good weighted object can't, there's not a lot of problems that a good weighted object can't solve. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of security that a good hammer can't get through or something along those lines. But you get the point. And I thought it was so beautifully put. The most recent piece of technology, you know, an actual programmer engineer, people who or the person that works in IT, people who understand the technology, they don't buy into this crap because they know it's just that. It's crap. You can't secure it. It's all designed to collect a bunch of, you know, stuff and work against you. It's horseshit. And don't say, oh, the young people are buying into this hook, line, and sinker. Guess what? I am pleased to announce and read to you that's not true. And it's not true for a lot of different age groups. In fact, when I was on my flight, I told some of this story on a Q&A. I had to go to Chicago. And on my flight there, sitting next to an older couple, probably in their late 40s, maybe getting into their 50s, but I think late 40s. And the conversation, it was the funniest damn thing because they're reading the newspaper. And I don't recall exactly how it started, but the guy was a physician and he was traveling with his wife. And she started getting it. He was a Whitesnake fan, actually. That's kind of how he and I got started talking before we even got on the plane. I ended up sitting next to him. And they started complaining about like privacy stuff and like, oh, and she's like, oh, I'm not on Facebook. I'm not going to get on there, blah, blah. I mean, and the conversation we had, and they start talking about privacy and everything. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, oh, you have no idea who you're sitting next to, you know? And eventually I told them, you know, that I do a tech podcast and that these are the very subjects I talk about. But everything they were saying, and I wasn't leading them at all. I was just listening. And they were laying it all out. They got it. They understood. They knew. No, these smartphones are fucking, you know, they're a cancer. And I mean, and it was, again, proof in the pudding. They were sitting there reading physical newspapers. It was beautiful. So the tech giants haven't won yet. People young and old, get it. We're being sold a bullshit bill of goods right now. And I couldn't be happier about it. And I can't think of a better way to end this show. But I'll tell you, you want to keep riding this train, you go ahead. You listen to Free Talk Live. Okay, you can go to the website if you need to, freetalklive.com. I thank them for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. They have been sponsoring the show for some time now. They just re-upped for 2020. I'm very honored by that, and I thank them for it. So check them out, freetalklive.com. Make sure you frequent any of our sponsors. Links for them, of course, are in the show notes. And you could say, Stallion, yeah, but if we got rid of our smartphones, how will we listen to our podcasts? Oh, baby. Oh, baby, we get in that direction. I'm already on various pirate networks. That's not a problem, really. You know, and I could just start, you know, pointing you in the right direction. But man, and please do, you know, I mean, again, we do have these things in front of us. Please do join the Telegram group. I really recommend that. In fact, I almost feel like I've been engaging so much with the Telegram group. It's like, well, this is good enough internet for me. I'll just fucking use the Telegram group and I'm not going to engage with the rest of this horseshit, you know? Anyway. So please do join that as well. Again, go to zombie1.com, sign up and get access to underground content. I'd be honored if you did. Of course, if you listened last week, I released kind of a double episode to satiate you. But I released one of our Q&As that the amazing Ellen Sovryn did with me. Whoa, did I? Hey, is it okay if I say that? Can I? Yeah. Can I tell them you're Ellen Sovryn? Yes. Yes? Okay. All right. She just said yes. Anyway, so... Woo! You can hear the Q&A that I did with Ellen Sovryn you know, and maybe that will entice you to sign up for the Zombie One Underground. But anyway, go for it, rock it. So wonderful to read that this is what's going on. And if books are the gateway drug, again, I mean, you know, we get into this all kinds of things, like in the music industry. You know, vinyl is back, has been back in for a while. Hell, audio cassettes are back in. Dynamite. I am on board with that. I can't wait till fanzines are owning ass again, and I'm not kidding. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Sovryn Tech. We were going to get into the Ring story. We'll save that for the next episode. We got plenty of content to come out throughout the month of February. I'll leave it here, and I will see all of you on the other side. Go read a book. Go buy a book. Physical book. Go for it. Have a good time. I'll see you on the other side.
Thank you for listening to Sovryn Tech, an Osiris One production. Now go out there and make some trouble.